I still remember the exact sound of the envelope hitting the wooden table. It was soft, almost harmless, like something ordinary had just entered our home. But for me, that envelope wasn't ordinary. It was everything. It had my name on it in bold, official ink. It carried years of sleepless nights, broken pencils, skipped meals, and endless hope. MID, the words were printed inside that envelope, but in my mind they were already glowing. I had worked for this since I was a child. Every competition I entered, every science project I stayed up late finishing, every exam I pushed through when I was exhausted, it all led to this one moment. I stood in the hallway holding it, my hands slightly shaking. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might break out of my chest. My mother was in the kitchen. I could hear the clinking of dishes, the normal rhythm of an ordinary evening. I walked in slowly, trying to control my excitement. "Mom," I said softly, almost afraid that speaking too loudly might change my fate. It came. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel. Her face didn't show curiosity at first, just routine tiredness. What came? I lifted the envelope with both hands like it was something sacred. The admission letter. For a second, everything froze. Even the air felt different. I saw her eyes narrow as she read the words on the envelope. MID. At first there was silence. Then her expression changed. Not joy, not pride, fear, no. She said immediately, too fast. "No, this is not possible." I blinked. "What do you mean? I got in. I actually got in." She stepped closer, taking the envelope from my hands. Her fingers tightened around it as if she was already deciding its fate. "America. You want to go to America, alone. Do you even understand what you're saying?" "I understand everything," I replied quickly. "This is what I've been working for my whole life. This is my future." Her voice rose. "Your future is here, with your family, with us, not across the world like some stranger." I felt something crack inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "Mom, this is MIT. This is one of the best universities in the world. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Opportunities don't matter if they destroy your roots." From behind her, I heard nothing from my father. He stood near the doorway, silent as always, avoiding my eyes like they were too heavy to hold. That silence hurt more than her words. "I won't be gone forever," I said softly. "I'll study, I'll come back, She cut me off sharply. "No, you will not go. This discussion is over." My breath caught in my throat. "You can't decide my entire life like this." Her grip tightened on the envelope. I saw it bend slightly at the edges. "I am your mother. I decide what protects you." And then it happened. Before I could react, she tore it. The sound was worse than anything I had ever heard. Paper ripping. My future splitting in half. I froze as she tore it again, slower this time, like she wanted me to see every piece of it fall apart. The MIT logo disappeared into fragments, my name. My identity on that paper was reduced to scraps. "No," I whispered, stepping forward. "No, no, no." I reached for the pieces instinctively, like I could glue my life back together with my hands. But she dropped them into the trash bin without hesitation. "There," she said coldly, "it's finished." I stood there, staring at the bin like it was swallowing my entire future. My father finally spoke, but only one sentence. "Listen to your mother." That was it. No support, no defense. No pride, just obedience. Something inside me stopped that night. Not completely broke, but changed. Like a door quietly closing in my chest. I walked back to my room without saying another word. Behind me, I could still hear normal life continuing, plates, conversation, television. As if nothing had happened, but everything had. I sat on my bed for hours, staring at the wall where I had pinned my study plans, my goals, my future sketches. I felt like I was looking at someone else's life now. Outside my window, The world looked the same. Inside me, nothing was. That night, I didn't cry loudly, I didn't scream, I didn't fight. I just made a silent promise to myself in the dark. If they won't let me walk toward my future, then I will build one so strong they won't recognize what they destroyed. After that night, my home didn't change, but I did. Everything outside still looked normal. Breakfast came at the same time. The same TV shows played in the background. My mother still gave orders like she was arranging the world into perfect lines. My father still stayed quiet, sitting like a shadow that had learned not to interrupt reality. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. I stopped being loud about my dreams. I stopped talking about universities. I stopped showing excitement when education came up at the dinner table. It wasn't peace, it was strategy. I had learned that hope spoken aloud could be destroyed. So I carried my future silently. At school, I pushed myself harder than before. Not for praise, not for validation, but because I had nothing else left that felt mine. Every lecture became a reminder of what I had lost. Every assignment became proof that I was still capable, even if no one at home believed it mattered anymore. At night, while my house slept, I rebuilt what had been torn. I downloaded many course materials I could find online. I studied physics beyond my syllabus, taught myself advanced math step by step, and wrote notes like I was preparing for a life no one had approved. My room became a hidden world, quiet, dim, and full of ambition that had nowhere else to go. Sometimes I would pause and stare at the empty space on my wall where my acceptance letter should have been. The memory of it being torn still replayed in my mind without warning. That sound had become something I could never forget. Paper ripping, dreams collapsing, but I didn't allow myself to stop. To survive at home, I learned how to become invisible. I answered only when spoken to. I kept my emotions locked behind neutral expressions. I stopped asking for anything. The less I needed, the less I could be controlled. Still, control found other ways. My cousin's son is not going abroad, my mother would say sometimes while cooking. He is staying here, where family is. The words weren't directly aimed at me, but they were reminders. Lessons, boundaries disguised as conversation. I would nod without responding. My father remained the same, present, but never interfering. Once, I tried to catch his eyes during dinner, hoping for even a hint of understanding. He looked away before I could reach him. That was the moment I stopped expecting rescue. Years passed like that, slow, heavy, silent. I completed school with high grades, though no one celebrated them the way I had once imagined. My achievements were acknowledged, but not understood. Success in my house was something practical, not emotional. It was measured in safety, not ambition. Still, I kept moving forward. To support myself, I started tutoring younger students. At first, it was just a few hours a week. Then it became regular. I earned small amounts of money, enough to buy books, sometimes enough to save. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't freedom, but it was mine. Every student I taught reminded me of who I used to be, someone who believed the world was wide open. One evening, after a long day of tutoring, I came home late. My mother was waiting in the living room. "You are always outside now," she said sharply. "People will talk." "I'm studying," I replied calmly. "For what?" she asked. "You already have education here." I didn't answer, because anything I said would turn into another argument I couldn't win. That night, I made my decision. If I stayed here, I would remain a version of myself that was constantly shrinking. I needed space, not just physical space, but mental freedom, somewhere I could rebuild without permission. So I started applying for scholarships, quietly, carefully, late at night when no one was watching. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to betray them, but because I knew what their answer would be. Months passed, rejections came first, then more rejections. Each one felt like a reminder of the original loss. But I kept going. I refined my applications. I improved my work. I rewrote everything as if I were rebuilding the torn pieces of that mighty letter. This time, stronger. Then one evening, while I was sitting alone in my room, I received an email. My hands trembled as I opened it. A full academic opportunity, international acceptance, partial funding, not MIT, but something that reopened a door I thought had been permanently sealed. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. It didn't feel real. It felt like the world was testing me, offering something fragile to see if I would dare touch it again. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I accepted it. When I finally told my family, I kept it simple. I will be leaving for studies. My mother's reaction was immediate. No, we already talked about this years ago. This is not the same, I said quietly. My father finally looked up. You should stay. Life is stable here. Stable, that word again. The same word that had once been used to bury my future. But this time, I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't try to convince them. Because I had already learned something important. You don't need permission to leave a place that refuses to let you grow. That night, I packed my bags silently. No celebration, no farewell, no emotional goodbye, just movement. Just decision. And as I closed the door behind me for the last time, I didn't look back, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally understood that my future was no longer behind me. 7 years don't feel like a long time when you look at a calendar, but when you live them one by one through failures, reinvention, and constant rebuilding, they feel like an entire lifetime split into versions of yourself you barely recognize. The person I was at 18 no longer existed. Not the hopeful student holding an MIT letter. Not the broken son sitting in silence after watching it torn apart. Not even the young graduate who left home without a proper goodbye. All of them had been replaced. In their place stood someone else, someone quieter, sharper, and far more deliberate. My life abroad was not easy at first. Nothing about it was. I worked through exhaustion most people never see on resumes. I learned to survive in rooms where I was the youngest, the least experienced, and often the least believed in. There were nights I questioned whether leaving home had been bravery, or just another form of loss, but slowly, things began to change. The same mind that was once dismissed started solving problems others couldn't. The same discipline that was born from pain turned into precision. I stopped chasing validation and started chasing results. And results, unlike people, don't argue back. Years passed in layers. First came stability, then recognition, then opportunity. I entered a field where ideas mattered more than background, where execution mattered more than approval, where what I had once been denied, independence, became the foundation of everything I built. By the time I was 25, I was no longer struggling to survive. I was building. A position in a global company followed. Then projects that crossed borders. Then financial stability I had once only seen in other people's lives. The same world that had once closed its doors on me began opening them not because it changed, but because I did. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about home every day, not because I forgot, but because I had learned how to carry memory without letting it control me. Still, life has a way of reopening old files when you least expect it. One evening, while reviewing a project late at night, I received a message from a distant relative. The name alone was enough to make me pause. It had been years since anyone from that side of the family had contacted me directly. I opened it. A few lines were enough to shift everything. My niece, my younger cousin's daughter, was preparing for university. She was bright, ambitious, and eager to study abroad, but financially the family was struggling. Her dream, like mine once, was hanging by a thread. There was no request directly, just information, just silence wrapped in implication. For a long time I didn't reply. I sat there staring at the message, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, not pain exactly, but recognition. Because I knew that feeling, the excitement of opportunity mixed with the fear of losing it before it begins. I remembered myself at 18, standing in a hallway, holding an envelope that should have changed everything. Torn, not metaphorically, actually torn. That memory didn't hurt anymore the way it used to. But it didn't feel distant either. It felt stored, like something carefully locked away but never deleted, and in that moment I made a decision without announcing it to anyone. If her path could be protected, I would protect it, quietly, without conditions, without expectation. Within weeks, I arranged funding, full support, education covered completely, not as charity, but as something more intentional than that. Something I didn't have words for at first. I didn't tell my family, not yet. I didn't want gratitude. I didn't want conversation. I didn't want old emotions to reopen before I was ready. I simply acted. Months later, the acceptance came. She got in. A strong university, a real opportunity, a future that would take her far beyond the limits she was born into. That should have been the end of it. But life rarely ends where we expect, because word travels faster than intention in families like mine. One evening my phone rang, an unfamiliar number, but I already knew before answering who it would be. My mother, her voice older now, carried something I had never heard before. Not authority, not control. Uncertainty. I heard something, she said slowly, about your niece. People are saying you paid for everything. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence sit. 7 years ago, silence had belonged to others. Now it belonged to me. Yes, I said finally. There was a pause on the other end, then a softer question followed. Why didn't you tell us? I looked out the window at the city I had built my life in. A place that had once been foreign, but was now familiar in a way my childhood home no longer was. Because I didn't need permission, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no anger in my voice, just clarity, because the rise they never expected wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't revenge in the way people imagine it, it was something far quieter. A life rebuilt so completely that the people who once broke it could no longer recognize its shape. The news didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a shockwave. My niece got into one of the top international universities on a full scholarship combined with my financial support. The acceptance email came on a quiet afternoon, the kind of moment where nothing in the world seems to be moving too fast. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to feel every word fully before reality settled in. For a moment I just sat there, no applause, no crowd, no dramatic reaction, just silence, but it wasn't empty silence. It was heavy with something I had been carrying for years without naming it, memory, not just of her success, but of mine, or rather, the success that was once supposed to be mine at 18, the letter that had arrived with hope. The same hope that had been destroyed in a kitchen by a single act of fear and control. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running away from that past. I felt like I had finally outrun it. But the past has a strange way of noticing when you stop running. Within days, the family knew. I didn't tell them. I didn't need to. In families like mine, good news doesn't stay contained, it spreads, reshaped by every mouth it passes through. By the time it reached my mother, it was no longer just education support. It had become something else. A story, a question, a challenge. Her call came late at night. I already knew it was her before I answered. This time her voice was different, not sharp like before, not commanding. It carried something unfamiliar, something almost fragile. "People are saying you did everything," she said slowly, "paid for her studies, arranged everything without telling us." "Yes," I replied simply. A long pause followed. I could almost hear her breathing on the other side, searching for the version of me she once knew. The one who asked permission, the one who stayed silent, the one who accepted decisions made for him. That version was gone. "Why would you do that for her and not tell your own family?" she asked. There it was. Not anger this time, confusion, and underneath it something she didn't say out loud, regret. I stood up and walked toward the window. The city lights stretched endlessly in front of me, like proof that life continues whether people approve of it or not. "I didn't do it for recognition," I said, "and I didn't do it for approval either." Her voice softened slightly. "We are your family." I closed my eyes for a moment. That sentence used to mean everything. Now it just sounded incomplete. "I know," I said quietly, "but I also remember what happened when I needed support." Silence again. Not defensive this time, just still. For the first time there were no interruptions, no arguments, no dismissals, only space, and in that space the past stood clearly between us. 7 years ago, I had stood in a kitchen holding an acceptance letter that represented everything I wanted my life to be. I had been young, full of belief, and completely unprepared for how quickly dreams can be destroyed by fear disguised as protection. I didn't bring that up to her. I didn't need to, because some memories don't require explanation when they are shared. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I added after a moment. "I'm just breaking a pattern." She didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, almost hesitant. "She's lucky to have you," she said. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Lucky. A word that once felt simple now carried layers. Because luck had nothing to do with it, it was choice and cost. After the call ended, I sat in silence again. But this time it was different, the kind of silence that doesn't weigh you down. It settles you. A few days later, I received a message from my niece. Her words were simple, full of excitement, disbelief, and gratitude. She didn't fully understand what had happened behind the scenes yet. To her, this was a beginning, a door opening, a life expanding. She had no idea that for me, it was something else too. A closure I never received at 18. But life doesn't always give closure in the way we imagine. Sometimes it gives you something better. It gives you continuation. Years of silence, struggle, and rebuilding had led to this moment. Not of revenge in the loud sense, not of confrontation or revenge spoken aloud, but something quieter, more permanent. I didn't destroy the people who once broke me. I simply made sure the next version of our story would not repeat mine. And in that realization, I understood something clearly for the first time. The greatest revenge was never about making others feel your pain. It was about making sure the pain doesn't get passed forward again. I didn't get my mighty letter back. But I did something far more lasting. I made sure hers would never be torn.